Back when I was about 17, I took a job at a local fast food restaurant that had only one location, and they specialized in chicken. Not really relevant what they served, but I will say that it was probably one of my favorite places to eat because it was seriously good. Plus, I had my own little ways of making things even better when I ordered food, the quirks of knowing the kitchen. That said, as good as the food was, this place tended to attract some of the worst people, both on the employee side and the customer side. I don't know what this says about me, being an employee, but I like to believe I was one of the better ones there. We'd had the cops come in and arrest some of our employees in the past for drug-related charges. Typically, they went without a fight. There was one time that the guy tried to run at the cops with a fryer basket. That was sort of entertaining. He got tased, and that was pretty much the end of it. Anyways, this isn't a fast food horror story. This is a story about one coworker in general named Cory. Cory was probably the quietest person to ever work there at the restaurant, and the most self-contained person I think I had ever seen. He was the type to always move out of your way when you were heading in his direction. He would basically cower back when you approached him, and he was really, really antisocial. He wouldn't really talk to anyone and was really bad at communication, which can really be a problem when it comes to working in a kitchen, even if it's just fast food. Fast forward to him working there about a month, and I was stuck on a closing shift with him. It went okay for the most part. I did most of the cleanup work in the lobby and front line. He had to clean up the back where the cooking stations were. It was mostly normal until right around the end of the shift, when we were doing a final walkthrough of the walk-in freezer. I entered to check the shelves and do a once-over on the day dots to make sure they weren't out of date and were done, and he enters behind me and stares me dead in the face and asks, "Is there really just the one way out of here? Like, if I were to shut and block the door, you wouldn't be able to get out?" I kind of just stared at him with a look of, "You're joking, right?" on my face. He quickly stepped it back, saying, "Not that I would do that. I was just curious. Like, isn't that technically a safety hazard?" I decided not to answer his question and finished up my checks, then said we could go. As we left the building and I locked up, he asked me if I wanted a ride home. Again, I just kind of stared at him. I had my own car. It was the only other car in the parking lot. I thanked him, but told him I could manage. He then asked me if I wanted him to follow me home, just in case. This was seriously the third huge blaring red flag to blow out of this guy in less than half an hour. I told him goodnight and quickly walked away to my car with my keys in my fingers just in case. On my way out, I actually called the manager of the store and reported what Cory had said to me in the freezer and mentioned that I didn't really feel comfortable working the shift alone with him anymore. My boss was an awesome lady, and she was more than willing to work within the confines of what the owner would let her. That night was the last night I closed alone with him, or he closed alone with anyone, actually. Every night he was a closer, there were now 3 people on the last shift. Of course, this wasn't the last time he did something creepy. About a couple of weeks later, he actually asked me why there had to be a third person on our closing shift. I shrugged and mentioned that the boss just wanted to make sure things got done on time in the right way, so having 3 people did make it easier. I then heard him mumble about how he missed just working with me at night. I let it go, mostly because I thought he wasn't going to be able to be that creepy person he was being. That same night, that proved to be an incorrect statement. After we closed, I was on my way home, not paying much attention to anything around me, when I looked up in my rear view at a red light and realized that he was seriously behind me. I had never seen him drive the same direction as I did when we got off work, but I had to think logically and accept that maybe, just maybe, he had a reason to be over here. I kept on down the road thinking he would turn or pull off, but no matter what turn I took, he kept up behind me. At the time, being 17, I lived with my parents, so I called my dad and told him I thought I was being followed. He told me to come straight home and that he would be waiting outside. Sure enough, when I pulled in, my dad was waiting by the driveway with his handgun strapped to his side. And sure enough, Cory had followed me the entire way. But when I pulled into the driveway, he sped past. My dad was obviously curious if I knew the guy. I told him he was a coworker that was a bit of a weirdo and that he had been a bit of a creep to me in the past. He was pretty upset, which was understandable, but I told him I had it under control and that management was aware of the whole thing. That night was actually the height of all of this. Not just him driving by, but what he did after. It was a Friday night, and it was pretty late, but I wasn't able to sleep because of the whole thing with Cory following me. I was sitting on my couch and watching a movie to try and get myself to pass out, when out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a car had pulled into the driveway. I thought for a moment that they were going to just turn around, but they sat there for a few moments, and I was a bit scared. I kind of shrunk down along the wall and peeked out, and to my surprise, I saw Cory walking up to the door. I was about to get up and seriously start yelling at this guy, but he then smashed the window on the door with what looked like a hammer. I stood there just freaking out for several moments. My dad came running down the stairs with a gun in hand and started screaming at Cory. It all felt like it was in slow motion, but it was actually pretty fast. My dad seriously pinned him down to the ground while my mom called the cops. When they got there, I had to explain to the police what I saw and the whole situation with Cory at work. And honestly, it was a nightmare. I thought this guy was just this quiet, maybe a bit awkward guy, but he was legit crazy. He was arrested since he was on the property, and they found a hammer by him when they showed up. I have no idea what happened to him, and sure, this may not seem like too much of a crazy stalker story, but for the short time this guy stalked me, it was awful. I'm glad he didn't escalate any further than smashing in the door's glass, but he also didn't have time to do so. Who knows what he would have done beyond that. I'm thankful I haven't seen him since that happened, and honestly, Cory, I'd be more than happy if we never met again.